My husband smiled when the security dog stopped beside our luggage. It lasted less than a second. A tiny movement at the corner of his mouth. Most people would have missed it. I didn't. After 8 years of marriage, I knew exactly what Daniel Brooks looked like when he was nervous, excited, angry, or pretending to be innocent. That morning he was terrified, not because he thought something might happen to me, because something had already gone wrong for him. Daniel believed I was about to become a criminal. He believed airport security would find illegal drugs hidden inside my suitcase, and within hours I would be facing an international trafficking investigation. He had imagined the headlines. He had imagined the divorce. He had imagined himself walking away with his mistress and a fortune he had stolen from his employer. He had even imagined the story he would tell everyone. Poor Daniel. His wife had a secret life. He never knew. He had been completely fooled. There was only one problem. I knew everything. My name is Emma Carter. I'm 34 years old, and for most of my adult life, I've worked as a forensic accountant. My job is simple. When money disappears, I find out where it went. 3 months earlier, I had started looking at our finances because Daniel's behavior had changed. He worked longer hours. He traveled without explanation. He became strangely protective of his phone, and whenever I asked an innocent question, he had an answer that sounded rehearsed. I didn't accuse him. I investigated. The first strange transaction was a $12,400 payment to a luxury hotel in Scottsdale. Daniel told me he'd been attending a conference. There was no conference. Then I found payments to a consulting company. The company had a website, a business registration, and an impressive-looking address. But when I checked the address, it belonged to an empty office suite. The money went into that company. Then another. Then another. Eventually, I found the same funds moving into accounts that Daniel controlled indirectly. I spent weeks tracing everything. The final amount was almost $7 million. My husband had been stealing from the pharmaceutical distribution company, where he worked as chief financial officer. And he wasn't working alone. One woman's name appeared repeatedly in his expenses. Sophie Grant, his executive assistant, his affair partner. I found hotel rooms, jewelry, weekend trips, private dinners, a second phone, and messages that left very little to imagination. Discovering the affair hurt. Discovering the theft scared me. But what came next changed everything. Daniel didn't just want a divorce. He wanted me erased from the picture. I realized that when he suddenly suggested a trip to Bali. "Our marriage needs a reset," he told me one evening. He had already purchased first-class tickets. He talked about beaches, sunsets, and remembering our first years together. Then he casually mentioned that Sophie would be traveling on the same route. She supposedly had a business meeting in Singapore. I smiled and pretended to believe him. But inside, every warning bell was ringing. Why would a man take his wife on a romantic trip and deliberately bring his mistress along? Unless the trip wasn't really about the wife. 2 nights before we left, I got my answer. Daniel thought I was asleep. Around 1:40 in the morning, I felt the mattress move. I kept my eyes closed. He walked across the bedroom. A few moments later, he returned with a small black case. Then he opened my suitcase. I watched through half-closed eyes. He removed a knife from his pocket and carefully opened a section of the inner lining. Then he placed a sealed package inside. He pressed the lining back into position. I heard him whisper something to himself. Perfect. Then he went back to bed. I waited until his breathing became steady. Then I got up. I carried the suitcase into my office. Inside the package was illegal narcotics, but the drugs weren't the only thing he had hidden. There was a miniature encrypted drive taped beneath the inner wrapping. I connected it to an isolated computer. The first folder contained records of the money Daniel had stolen. The second contained account information connected to hidden assets. The third contained something far more disturbing. A collection of documents designed to frame me. There were fake emails written in my name, fake messages, fake financial records, and a typed confession describing crimes I had never committed. Daniel wasn't simply planning to leave me. He was building a fictional version of me that would take the blame for everything. The more I read, the calmer I became. Fear had a strange effect on me. It made me precise. I copied the files, I preserved the evidence, I contacted a lawyer, and I quietly provided the financial records to investigators, but I didn't tell Daniel. Not yet. I wanted him to believe he was still in control. The next morning, he kissed my forehead before leaving for work. "Almost time for our new beginning," he said. I smiled. Yes. He had no idea how true those words were. On the morning of our flight, Daniel loaded my suitcase into the car. He looked unusually relaxed. That almost made me laugh. He believed the evidence was still hidden inside. It wasn't. I'd removed it hours earlier. I had also made one important change to his plan. The package was no longer going where he expected. At the airport, we met Sophie near the international terminal. She looked nervous, but not because she thought anything was wrong. She was nervous because she knew she was participating in something dangerous. Daniel kept telling both of us to remain calm. We joined the priority security line. He placed his hand lightly against my back. "Just a few more minutes," he whispered. I looked at him. "Are you nervous?" He smiled. "Why would I be?" Exactly. Why would he? My suitcase went through the scanner. The officer examined the screen, then waved me forward. Daniel's expression changed. He stared at the monitor. He had expected the scanner to reveal something. Instead, my suitcase was completely ordinary. He looked at me, then at the suitcase, then back at me. Before he could say anything, a security officer approached with a trained detection dog. The dog moved along the luggage belt. It checked one bag, then another, then mine. It paused briefly, but kept moving. Daniel exhaled. Then the dog reached Sophie's suitcase. It stopped. Its ears lifted. It sniffed the lower corner. Then it sat down. The handler immediately raised a hand. "Nobody touch that bag." Sophie stared at him. "What?" "Step away from the luggage, please." Daniel's face lost its color. Sophie looked at him. "Daniel?" He didn't answer. Security officers surrounded the suitcase. Sophie started protesting. "You can't just open my bag." The officer calmly explained the procedure. Then the suitcase was opened. The package was discovered inside a concealed section of the lining. Sophie stared at it. Her mouth fell open. "I don't know what that is." The officer tested the substance. The result came back positive. Sophie began shaking. "Daniel, tell them." He still said nothing. He was staring at me. I was standing several feet away, calm, still, holding a paper cup of coffee. I gave him the smallest smile. And suddenly, he understood. His plan had been reversed, but he didn't understand how. A senior investigator stepped toward him. His name was Michael Carter, my older brother. Daniel had met him several times over the years. What Daniel didn't know was that Michael had been briefed about the financial investigation before our flight. Michael looked at Sophie. "Who packed this suitcase?" Sophie immediately pointed at Daniel. "He handled it yesterday." Daniel shook his head. "She's lying. You bought my ticket." "Sophie, stop. You told me everything would be fine." Daniel's voice became sharper. "Not here." The officers separated them. Daniel looked around. He was searching for an escape. Then his eyes landed on my suitcase. His face changed again. He couldn't understand why it had passed through security. He couldn't understand why Sophie's suitcase had been flagged. And then panic overpowered his judgment. He pointed toward the luggage and shouted, "That package wasn't supposed to be in her bag." The room went silent. Sophie stared at him. Daniel froze. He realized he'd spoken too quickly. Michael's expression hardened. "Which package?" Daniel said nothing. One of the officers stepped closer. "Sir, turn around." Daniel immediately started talking. "You don't understand." Michael interrupted. "We understand more than you think." The handcuffs went on. Sophie was detained. Daniel was taken away for questioning. But the airport incident was only the beginning. Later that afternoon, I sat across from Daniel in an interview room. For the first time since I had known him, he looked genuinely helpless. He stared at me. You knew. It wasn't a question. I placed a folder on the table. I knew enough. He looked at the folder. What did you do? I followed the money. I opened it. The first page showed the money transfers. The next showed the shell companies, then the hidden accounts, then the fabricated documents he had prepared in my name. Daniel's breathing became heavier. You stole my files. No. I shook my head. You left them behind. He stared at me. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted to see how far you'd go. He looked down. For months, Daniel had told me I was imagining things. He had convinced me that my questions were unreasonable. He had made me feel guilty for noticing the obvious, but he had underestimated one thing. I wasn't interested in his excuses. I was interested in evidence, and evidence doesn't care how charming you are. By that evening, the company's investigators had received the financial records. The hidden accounts were being examined. The fabricated evidence intended to frame me had become evidence against Daniel. His affair was exposed. His theft was exposed. And his attempt to turn me into a criminal had collapsed in the middle of an airport. I walked out of the building alone. The evening sky over Miami was turning orange. I expected to feel anger. Instead, I felt relief. For 8 years, I had thought strength meant holding a marriage together. I was wrong. Sometimes strength means recognizing when something is broken beyond repair. Sometimes revenge isn't about hurting someone. Sometimes revenge is simply refusing to let their lies become your reality. Daniel wanted me frightened. He wanted me confused. He wanted me to doubt myself. Instead, I trusted the part of me that kept asking questions, and that part of me saved my life. So if someone keeps telling you that you're imagining things, don't automatically silence yourself. Look closer, ask questions, follow the facts, and trust your instincts. Because the person who underestimates you may eventually make the one mistake you need. Daniel thought he had written my ending. He thought he had planned every detail, but he forgot one thing. I had been watching the entire time. And when he finally made his move, I was ready. If this story kept you hooked, tell me in the comments, what country are you watching from? And if you enjoy stories about betrayal, hidden secrets, clever revenge, and unexpected justice, subscribe to Emma Tells All for more new stories, because sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one who already knows how the story ends.